Hey, what's up? I'm Ray Green, former managing director of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, former CEO of PE-backed companies, and currently the founder of Repeatable Revenue, a growth coaching community for consultants and coaches and fractional executives who are leveraging their expertise to build businesses online like I did myself. And every month I bring in a new expert to talk to us about their journey as an entrepreneur, share their expertise to help us unlock our own businesses so that we can build them bigger and better, and do some Q&A. And this month we brought in the Queen of Ops herself, Megan Kuethen, who has a consulting firm named the Queen of Ops. And she specializes in helping digital entrepreneurs improve their operations, meaning tech, systems, processes, people, hiring, leadership, you name it. So we dive into who your first hire should be, what your first system should be, what your processes should be. How do you scale from a couple 100,000 up to 1 million and beyond? And we get to hear about her journey as an entrepreneur, all the expertise she has to share, and then go into Q&A. So without further ado, let's dive in and figure out how to operationalize your business.
I actually left corporate in 2012. I had started a photography business in 2005, and in 2012, I had one of those everything went wrong kinds of years, and I thought this is the perfect time for me to quit and just go all in on my business. I did that. I failed absolutely miserably, as I think a lot of us do. And it was because I didn't correlate the business experience that I had from corporate with running my itty bitty teeny tiny artistic business. And so I actually went back into corporate. I got a job in recruiting because that was at that point what I was best at. It was the easiest thing. I committed to doing it for a year and getting the most I could. I actually went to work for, I don't know if you guys have heard of Robert Half. They're a many billions over business, worldwide staffing company. And so I thought there's a lot for me to learn here in terms of how to actually run a business. I could make sales. I was great at marketing, but I didn't really know how to create operations within a business, even though that is what I had done. So I went all in there, but also was secretly, building my business after hours. Ended up leaving, grew the photography business into a multi-photographer studio because I actually really understood operations. Then I was like, okay, I get it. I know how to build the operations. But I hated what I was doing. It was not complex enough for who I was and what I enjoyed. I think we all have been there where we think oh, I need another challenge. That's a lot of us entrepreneurs want something that's bigger and more exciting. So I accidentally found my way in 2018 into Chris Evans, then Traffic and Funnels Mastermind, doing coaching for photographers. I hated photographers. They were not fun to work with. And so it was in 2020, I literally ended an engagement. My dog died. I got hit by a tornado, and all in the space of about 2 months. And then little did I know COVID was about to hit us. But that was the first 2 months of the year. And I just was you know what? I think I need a change. I need to go all in on something else. And I'm great at business operations. So I think I'm going to do that. And thus Queen of Ops was born as I was driving across the country from Tennessee to my parents in California and watching as everything was shutting down for COVID. So having this moment of, oh no, did I just close down my good revenue source while the whole world is dying? What's even going to happen to me? So yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Oh my gosh. All right. So how did you determine what your next offer was going to be? So you made out of the photography business into the online space through TNF.
Yeah.
How did you find that next audience or that next market?
So fortunately I had made a lot of great friends through Traffic and Funnels, and I'd kind of become known as this ops queen. I was the go-to person in my mastermind for ops and people related questions. And I'd like already had people saying like, hey, would you want to do recruiting for us? Would you want to do like, could you help us by consulting on our systems and our processes? And so it just felt like the easiest thing. I really didn't think I was going to stick with it. I just thought this is probably a good interim to do some like operations consulting. And so I did get I picked up 2 clients just doing regular old operations consulting. And then my friend Alaric, who owns Ad Outreach, I don't know if anyone's heard of them, but he said, hey, I don't need operations help. I have a great ops person, but I really need hiring help. And I was like, I just need money at this point. It's 2020. Like, yes, I will do that. And so then I accidentally built this full service recruiting firm because Alaric can't keep his mouth closed. And so, yeah, before I knew it, I had like 10 referrals from him and then referrals from those people. And it was one of those really, I think of it as like a serendipitous kind of things that I thought I was going to do ops. Consulting wasn't probably like the best fit for me, at least like one-to-one consulting. And I ended up building like this full service agency. So yeah, it was cool.
Nice. Yeah, I transitioned out of corporate in 19, and I was like, I know some like really, really wealthy consultants that seem to have a ton of autonomy. I want to go do that. And then immediately afterwards, COVID starts. So I'm in Baja. I've burnt the bridges behind me. And it's like, okay, you've got to figure out this online space a lot faster than you thought. So how did you transition from, because a lot of people in my audience have expertise, they have corporate experience, so they have like deep expertise in something, and they want to productize it. They want to transition from the consulting or the one-on-one coaching into a business. Like, how do I productize this? How do I scale it up? How did you transition from what you knew personally, which was ops, and turning that into more of a business and an agency you could scale up?
Yeah. I mean, things were really messy for a while. I was doing the spaghetti at the wall method, where I tested, do people respond to wanting processes? Do they respond to the message of fractional ops? Like, do they respond to whatever? And ultimately, the thing that really took off was hiring, and it was really easy to productize. And I've since kind of realized like everything is actually easy to productize, and productization is the key. It creates something that feels more tangible, and in the online world, and really just the nature of work as it is nowadays, that really is key. And so it was, again, it was an accident. But it was also something that I think, if you have like all your people, like they're experts, they are deep experts, that was the key for me. And that was partially why I hated working with photographers, was it wasn't a very tangible offer that you can't, or I didn't know how at the time to like strongly productize what like coaching was. But when I switched over to hiring, it was like, we will do this. Our process looks like this. You can expect this. Everything was super, super clear. And I knew that I could deliver on that because I had obviously done it literally thousands of times. And I had, a wealth of knowledge and tools and templates, and I knew I could train people on it. So it just became something that felt really effortless compared to everything else that I was trying. Everything else I was trying was just like, I will help you with ops, and no one responds to that, not because they don't want ops or need ops or recognize that they need ops, but because they just are, that's not an outcome. And so when you can give people an outcome, when you can say, here's your pain or your problem, because not everybody is even problem aware. But I see your pain here. I can create this solution for you, and I can do it in this time frame. And that is much easier for people to say yes to.
Like a tangible transformation. It's like when you say I can help you with ops, that's basically the value proposition of an employee, right? Like you're going to bring me in and I'm going to do a multitude of things and use my skills and personally do it all, as opposed to I'm going to solve a problem with a process and give you a transformation.
Yes, exactly that.
When I talk ops with people, I think most people, especially in the online space, tend to think that that means your tech stack, right?
Yeah.
That's your CRM, that's your automation,
Yeah.
that's part of it. But can you tell me when you talk ops, because we've already talked a little bit about recruiting and stuff, what is ops like when you define it?
So this is my favorite question ever. And by the way, if you ask an ops person, if you ask 10 ops people, you will get at least 20 different answers, like what is ops? And so like I think that's such a good indication of how challenging we all find operations, including ops people. I usually like to break it down to basically systems, processes, people, and then like with you can kind of get nitty gritty with those, but that pretty much covers it. It's systems, processes, systems being stuff that computers can do, processes being like, sorry, systems is like automation by computer, process is automation by human, and then people is like the people aspect of that.
So the fun part about my job is I get to call in experts and talk to them about things that like I actually want to know personally in my business. And it's I hope that by doing that, it's also a ton of value for everybody that's listening because they're all doing something similar. And so it's some of the questions I have for you are around these different stages of business, right? Like you start when you're consulting and you start to productize, you're kind of in the like solopreneur land, and you are marketing, you are sales, you are fulfillment, and then the dog catches the car, and people start buying your stuff, and now you get into these like, oh shit, I can't keep all of these plates spinning at the same time,
Yeah.
but I have revenue coming in, but I now have to figure out which of these pieces I'm going to automate, who I'm going to hire, how I'm going to do it. And oftentimes you're juggling like this awkward financial piece because you're doing more than you needed to do as a solopreneur, but you can't go hire a $250,000 ops person or, like big time recruiters and big time agencies.
Yeah.
So in that early space, because you've gone through it yourself, even,
Oh yeah.
how would you tell an entrepreneur that's kind of like reaching that capacity how to start thinking about systems and processes and people?
Yeah. So I usually say the order that we want to do things in is process, system, person. And that is because you should ideally, not to should y'all, but you should ideally be creating processes for yourself. It's amazing, and I'm guilty of it, by the way. It's amazing how many times as solopreneurs we make a sale and we go and we make a payment link for like that particular person. And then we make another sale and we go and make a payment link for that particular person. And there are no shortcuts. That's really what a process is. It's just like removing the thinking from it. And so instead of a lot of times doing it in a streamlined kind of way, we have to revisit every single time, how do I make a link? What were all the things that I needed to onboard this person? What was involved? What promises did I make? Shoot, do I have the call recording somewhere? All that kind of stuff. And like, again, I think that I'm great at ops because I have ADHD and like my life, I would be dead without ops. And I certainly would not have a business without ops. But like I've sat in that mess. And so I always say like start with process because you yourself need process. And then look at where you can bring in technology to assist you. Can you create a Calendly link that will like eliminate having to do X, Y, and Z? Can you have a gosh, I don't know if anyone else is guilty of this, but like I have a tendency to like, even this happened actually, I was onboarding somebody on on Friday. And I realized, oh my gosh, I don't have my like typical is a different offer than I'd done for a while. I don't have my typical templates. I don't have my templates up. Like, where are my templates stored? And like going through that panic while I'm on the onboarding call. Anybody else? No, just me. Okay. Yeah. All right. At least a couple others.
Yep.
So, making sure that like technology is assisting us in those things. And then we can look at, okay, like I already have the process and so it's easier, not easy, but it's easier to hand that off to another person. And I have this template in place so somebody else doesn't have to go through and think about the questions that they're going to ask or the way that they're going to do this. And so like that's really the way that I think about ops. And really, by the way, if you think about it, a lead generation system is ops. Like that is a process or a system. Your marketing and your sales are just different facets of, and even like client success, those are different facets of operations. Ops is inseparable from, it's not a separate department. It is part of your sales team, your marketing strategy, the way that you are fulfilling all of the promises that you made to your clients. So it's in everything. You may as well resign yourself to the process and put things in place to just make it easier is kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that because I've just recently started to really think about it from an accountability chart standpoint. And as you, not just for my business, but I like just rethinking all of the businesses that I've run. Ops isn't inherently like another arm of it. Ops is like across all of it, and there's not necessarily a separate internal ops piece. It's like that is just how you do business, and integrating it into all the different facets of the business, I think is really important. When it comes to, so you said start with processes, and I agree. And so there's like this, you create your SOPs, and the challenge I've always had with SOPs, I've gone in and done like sales audits as a consultant with people who have playbooks that are 72 pages long. They are stacked up all over the place. There's an SOP for virtually everything. But when you audit it, people aren't using it. And they become so laborious to maintain and so laborious to digest that they don't get actually adopted. They don't get used. So the philosophy of systems and processes is there, but it becomes so like it's too detailed. It becomes laborious. Like, so they don't get used. So there's not much value. How would you think about as you're scaling up? So you're passing, call it a few 100,000 and going up towards 1 million. What do I SOP, and how do I make sure that SOPs just don't end up like a cool chart that never actually get organized and implemented into the business?
Yeah. So first is, if you think of SOPs as a spectrum, on this end is like, I have none officially. And on this end, no one would be able to get in the door of my business if I didn't have it written out step by step for them. That's a problem that we see a lot of times in corporate, is like they've broken it down and done all the thinking for you. I'm sure we've all sat through some kind of onboarding where they're telling us like the most granular details. And it's like, well, I actually was born with a brain, and so I can do this part. So finding, and every organization will have a little bit of a different balance, but finding where that middle balance part is for you, and not just for where you are right now, but thinking about where you want to be as you are onboarding, whether they're VAs in the Philippines or, a person who's going to sit next to you or whatever else. And so I always think like start light and lean. You can always add steps to flesh it out a little bit more. But like when you're starting just for yourself, you don't really need things to be robust. And I definitely shy away from robust. So where I personally fall is like a 4 to a 5 within my organizations. If one is like no detail at all, no SOPs, and 10 being that like you can't open the door. And I know that people think that's crazy for an ops person to say, 4 or 5, but like anything more than that, and I find that people treat it like it's a finished product, and it turns my people into hands instead of brains. I never want hands on my team. I don't have the bandwidth to manage hands. I love having brains on my team. Brains are doing thinking for themselves, and they can read between the lines, and they can go, this is outdated, or this needs to have something added to it, or hey, we switched this software 4 months ago and no one's bothered to do this. And they can create, it tends to have a like proactive updating effect. So keeping it simple, and like, if anything, like understepped. I don't know. That's not a word. It's a word now. So that's kind of like, that's my preference, is to have it be like a 4 or a 5. None of us are probably aspiring to grow 200, 300 person organizations where we would need to have the level of detail that corporate, like I think of it as like the 7+. Like the 7+ is not for you unless you're planning to have a very large team. 4 or 5 is like, we're getting along. Everything is like, we have all the processes, but you're going to have to still be a human and use your brain.
I read this recently that I think it was Reid Hoffman said, the mistake that I made early was if you build a business with so many SOPs that a dummy could work there, then you end up with a business that only dummies that want to work there.
Yeah.
Because really smart people don't want to be told to a T exactly how to do everything.
Right.
You hit on something like, so you get the SOPs and you hire somebody, and we'll talk about hiring in a minute, but you hire somebody in. How do you ensure that those SOPs are implemented and actually adopted and then updated and maintained properly, so that if and when the beer truck hits somebody, as we used to say in corporate, that somebody could step in and at least reasonably figure out how to do things, that they don't become archaic and they don't become out of date. They don't become like I know that's how we're supposed to do it, but how do you ensure adoption and updates?
Yeah. So part of that is training. And I do something called transferring. I literally just renamed it. It's just rebranding. So we all think of it as delegating. Like, we hire someone, we're going to start like delegating things to them. And I don't know about you, but in my corporate experience, delegating was sort of this thing where like I would do it and my manager would like micromanage me for an absurd amount of time and look in detail over everything that I did and like fault me for it, write me up for, whatever. And it was like so annoying. Again, the idea that we're all dummies, right? The way that I train my people, and also now like teach my clients to do this, is by transferring. And so I say, like, we're on a call and I'm transferring a task to you. I'm going to say, hey, Ray, I'm going to teach you how to do this thing. And then you're going to do it. And so I'll go through step by step, very slowly, make sure that they know that they can ask questions. And then I'm going to say, all right, I want you to do it in front of me. And so I mostly have remote teams. So like, they are literally just going to do it on Zoom, and they can pause and ask questions. Was it this thing? Do I click this button now? Or was there something else that I was missing? And then I say, okay, great. You got it. So first is learn. Second is do. And now I say, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to go teach this to the next person who has your job in a Loom video. My goal for you is to grow out of this in the next 3 months or 6 months. So this is a process that you're going to be responsible for keeping updated, because if it's not done, you won't be able to hand this off and transfer this to that next person. So make sure you keep this updated. I assume that you are going to adapt this, update it, that you're going to probably have a suggestion somewhere along the road or down the road. You don't need my permission to update it. but it is your responsibility to update it. So I no longer own this. You own it. If it fails, it's on you. You won't be able to get out of it if you haven't like kept up that documentation. And again, our documentation is pretty light. We're not looking for like a whole manual. We're just looking for a Loom video, maybe a template, maybe a whatever. And it just has to stay updated. We would when I had a large team, at its peak, Queen of Ops was 22 people. So when we had 22 people, actually, I think around 14-ish was when we had a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces, multiple like levels in the organization. That was when we started doing quarterly audits on SOPs. And at that point, I said, like, I don't want my directors auditing the SOPs. Like every person we're just going to have an SOP audit day where everyone audits their own work to make sure that like it's up to snuff. And we call it hit by a bus. If they were hit by a bus, they would be able to like someone would be able to step in and take over where they left off. But we also had an unlimited PTO policy. And you couldn't go on vacation if your SOP wasn't updated because somebody else couldn't step in and do your job.
That works. That's super helpful. So we've hit on this a little bit. So other people, as you start adding them to the business, one question I'll start with is more of an opinion, and it's like I've run teams remotely and I've run teams in the office, and there are just a ton of synergies when you're running, at least from a sales team standpoint, like having people in the office, right? Like you can. When I can hear what other people are doing, there's like the transfer of knowledge is a lot easier. The visible sense of accountability. Like I know when somebody shows up, I can generally walk through the office and kind of get a sense of when people are working and when they're not. And as a manager, I've always felt like there's a little bit of intuition. Like you can just kind of feel the morale, you can feel the vibe. And I've run remote teams, and then there's different synergies there, the trade-offs. Your view, can remote teams be as productive and have as high and productive as a culture as you can in person?
Yes, and I would have said yes before, but not been totally sure. I would have said it confidently and been like, I hope I'm not lying here. But I have seen, so right now I am a part of a couple different, or I shouldn't say a part of, I get to consult with a couple different organizations. And one of my clients actually had to lay off a couple people last week. They laid off 3 people. Like the collective team, getting to see like them literally crying on calls because they were sad that they were losing these team members. Like seeing the one guy, it was like hey, like we don't have to lay you off, but we have to take away your base. So if you're willing to work commission only, like we can do that. And he was like, well, what's the best thing for the company? And just like seeing his heart for that. And so now I'm, kind of helping to find those people work and getting to talk with them and hearing the things that matter to them. And so like I've seen that in my own company, but I've also seen it in some of my clients' companies. And in that same way that we have experienced in the in-person environment, it can be done really beautifully and like really well in a way where people actually do bond and they care about each other in that same family-like way. I always tell people like, we don't want to be family. We want to be maybe family-like. And so like the answer is like, definitely yes. It takes, I think, a lot more, not work, but intention, not more time, but more like dedication, I guess. So it's harder. But then like once it's working, it's actually, I think, very easy.
Okay. Interesting. So in terms of thinking about hiring, so one of the early mistakes I made, like very, very early on, was I hired too big too soon, right? Like coming from corporate, I was like, well, I clearly need like a COO level person to partner
Yeah.
with on me. And we're like, we don't even have the fucking tech stack. We don't even have leads. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
But now I like in hindsight, I realized, okay, but in prior turnarounds, like if, as a CEO, you plug me in, the first thing I'm gonna do is find my high level ops person because they're going to like execute so much of this. And then, so I almost overcorrected, right? Then I said,
Yeah.
okay, I'm just going to only hire VAs for a while. I'm going to keep the budget super lean, keep
Yeah.
keep the SOPs like super tight. And that became a different type of business for me because now I'm like only you said hiring hands. I always think of like Dan Sullivan's hiring who's versus hows, right?
Yeah.
How to use, but it's funky sometimes in the middle because the budget's not all the way there. You're not really sure if a senior level person's the right move, but a VA oftentimes can be a lot of work, like finding the right VA and getting the right systems in place. How do you coach entrepreneurs that are earlier stage and growing about how do you start building your team and how do you determine what level of seniority to hire and when and all of that?
Yeah. I'm going to admit a very strong bias that I have here so that y'all can just know where I'm at. And that is, I hate hiring Americans. Um, like, love American entrepreneurs, but I will go far out of my way. Like, guys, I'm talking like I'll hire Canadians just to like avoid hiring Amer- if I need someone who is like that account manager level and like they're not going to have an accent or whatever, I will literally hire from the UK. I'll hire from Canada. Like, I hate hiring Americans. Do I do it from time to time? Yes. But God help us. So here's the thing is like I have
What
hired
about Americans in Mexico? Like, does that count?
I don't know. I've heard they're all sketchy.
Okay.
um so my thing is it takes just as much work to find a really good what y'all call VAs as it does to hire a or find and hire a really good person in North America. And the difference is usually in our mindset. So I don't let any of my clients call their people VAs because VA is general and we expect the person to kind of be a mediocre generalist. You're paying $3 to maybe $8 an hour for that person. And again, your mindset is that's dirt cheap, so I expect very little. I will tell you the two best employees I have ever had, and I've had hundreds of people who have worked for me. The two best people were both from the Philippines. Both of them were $10 an hour base pay with some bonus. And like I literally dream of the business that they work for now going under so that I can steal them back because I think like what I could do with those two. Like, I just am like, we all say our bedtime prayers in some form or fashion. Like, I wish this, I wish that. I'm like, God, if you really loved me, you would make this business go under so that like, and it's like kind of a joke. Kind of. But like those two unstoppable. Like they can handle clients, they can handle tech, like they can handle me. I don't know if that's the thing that you guys all have, but like people who can actually communicate with me, who understand that like when I just stop talking in the middle of a sentence, they are not to speak. That means that I'm processing. I've got some new idea happening. And so, to me, it's not about where the person is located. It's a lot of times about who like what skills they have, how we treat them, how well are we defining that role. That right there, if you will define the role better and hire for that role, I have found phenomenal people in basically every category. I've hired US based media buyers and Philippines based media buyers and like Ukrainian media buyers. And like always, my US based media buyers are absolute garbage. And my media buyers who are in like all these other places, as long as we defined the skill set, they're performing higher because like they feel like they have something to prove. Whereas our US based people are like, what do you mean you're not going to pay me $120 an hour? Like, just to show up and like have the skills. like whether I do something with them or not. Clearly very biased. It's so good that I warned you. You wouldn't have figured it out on your own. Uh, so I just like I love and by the way, like I'll hire from different places for different things. So usually for marketing talent, the South America is like an incredible place to hire marketing talent. The reason is we've probably all heard of BPOs, business process outsource. Basically, in the 90s and 2000s, companies started to build these business centers doing specific things like call centers in India kind of thing. They started to build these in specific areas. And so then like there became a like generational knowledge sort of thing that happened where, so what happened in South America was companies were moving marketing there, and then those employees were teaching like the next round of employees who were teaching the next round of employees, and they're not all, there's some turnover, but that creates more of just like a hotspot for marketing knowledge, and where they're beginning to sharpen themselves the same way that we entrepreneurs do when we all go hang out in San Diego together, or we all go hang out in, where I'm in Nashville or in Miami or wherever, is like the knowledge around that area grows. So now like I'm in Nashville and I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs. And in that same way, like South America has a lot of these specific spots for marketing. So operations actually is a great thing to hire for out of the Philippines. But you can also hire from Eastern Europe, like incredible tech talent in Eastern Europe and just like operational minds. Serbia, Ukraine, gosh, there's actually like a ton. There's a ton. So yeah.
I've had people in the Philippines. Our developer for the web right now is from Ukraine. And we've actually just recently started looking at Mexico, because just from a time zone standpoint for future hires. One of the questions that I've had, and I know our members have had, is I'm doing most of the things right now, and maybe I have like a VA or something, but like generally speaking, I'm doing marketing, I'm doing sales, I'm doing fulfillment. I know I need to hire, and I've got some budget to hire, but I don't know who to hire yet. And I don't know the exact right process that I should go through, because I don't want to over corporate this thing, but I also don't want to just like throw shit on a wall. So how would you help, or how would you coach an entrepreneur to think, okay, evaluate like what you're doing. This is going to be your best strategic hire, and here are some steps that I would take to help minimize the chance that your hire sucks.
Okay, so two questions. The minimizing one, we'll get back to that.
Okay.
The how do you know what to hire question is probably the number one question that I get. And I love this question because it's so easy and yet it feels so hard. So the way that I do it is when it's just me, I just look at all the responsibilities or all the like tasks or whatever that I did during the week. And I have a ClickUp board where I keep track of all of that stuff. So I have like, whether it's responding to emails, like little nitty gritty, like actual task-based stuff, or more like project-based, finish rebuilding this page on the website, or complete this project for this client or whatever. So I have all of that and I review those. So as I mark them as complete, they move into the complete column. At that point, like at the end of the week, I review all of those and I will then sort them into done by me, should be done by me, should be done by somebody who's like on my team, or should be done by somebody that is not on my team yet. And so like those will then, I'll move them to one of those 3 ClickUp boards. So it'll be as a, like, that stays me. That's something that I want to keep doing. Maybe because it's just not the right time to bring somebody on, maybe because the cost is too high, whatever that reason is, I'm going to keep that for now. It should have been done by someone on my team goes onto a board that then the team and I will review on Mondays. And I go, hey, I found myself doing this week. Ray should have been doing this. Sophie should have been doing that, whatever that might look like. And so then we set up a time to do that task transfer that I talked about earlier. And then there's that. So I have it's called TBH, to be hired board. And so everything moves into a queue there. And by the way, this is like my fancy ops system. Y'all can just use Post-it notes. You can use, like, if you have a remarkable, you can just be like taking notes on your remarkable. Excel spreadsheet, whatever you feel like. But for me, this is on a board, and I start to sort it by, okay, well, this is an ops task. And I realize that I've got 30 ops tasks. And so that's like looking like a pretty heavy workload compared to marketing. I must like marketing. I probably want to keep my marketing tasks because there are only like 2 or 3 things here. I could easily hire someone to edit videos for me. Or like outsource that like editing videos thing, compared to this amount of time is now substantial for me. Or I'm seeing the same couple things that are recurring here and noticing that either takes up a lot of time, it takes up a lot of mental energy or bandwidth. And so that's kind of that's my system. Otherwise, we tend to look at it based off of what feels hardest, but we're not looking at actual like data. So I want to know, like, how much time am I spending, how many tasks, and also, by the way, what a great shortcut for building out your position profile or your job description is, like, you already have all the things that you've done that you now want to transfer over to like this person. So it's like a real good shortcut. So hopefully that helps. The other way, of course, is to do a time audit. When I do time audits, I don't actually measure the amount of time. I usually do it based off of, like, what did I do again, like today or this week? How much energy did it take from me? How much joy did it give me? So like it could be something that I'm really good at, I'm really fast at, but it is like a joy like drain. And that's going to be something that I'll hire for fastest, as opposed to something that maybe is very time consuming, but that like I enjoy doing. So yeah, I don't know. Does that help?
It helps a lot. It's interesting that you mentioned that on the second half, because I'm big on time audits. And I like kind of publicly admitted this a few months ago, probably at the beginning of the year, that there was one piece that I missed in time audits, and it was the energy level. And it was because I went through and like meticulously audited my time, and I was trying to buy back as much time as possible. So I outsourced these pieces. And then once I successfully outsourced these pieces, I realized, hey, I actually liked doing those things. So now I've got more time on my hand, but the thing that's on my plate is shit that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Well, I got that wrong. So I go, okay, what would you say to somebody? I was talking to a friend of mine on hiring, and I'd mentioned the time audit mindset. And he said, the only challenge with that is you're buying back your time, but you're only buying back your capabilities. And oftentimes you need to hire somebody to add to the capabilities of what you're doing. Yeah. And how would you differentiate between, I need to hire to clear this chunk of time back so that I can reallocate it, versus I'm going to keep a full plate. We should be doing X, Y, Z, or I think we should be doing X, Y, Z, and we're not today. So I'm going to go hire somebody to do something that we're not even doing today.
Oh, that's such a good question. So, a couple of different ways. So usually either hit a ceiling where you're like, we can't do this with my current capabilities, so I have to hire outside of my capabilities in order for us to continue growing. And that's sort of like a depth or height, I guess, thing. And then the other issue is more breadth. So we could add this complementary, not complementary as in free, but complementing service that would be such an easy add-on if we had this other skill set. So something that I have considered doing is hiring on a like legal and compliance person into like my people operations consulting. I have enough knowledge that I can answer most of my clients' questions. enough to get us all into a little bit of trouble, but not into too much trouble. But like, I'm not gonna keep up. When I lived in a place, worked in that place, my whole team was in that place, no problem keeping up with like one state's rules. But now when I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm consulting with people in all these different places who have employees in all these different places, some 1099, some W-2, like maybe I really need a legal and compliance person who can do like the consulting on all of that. So that would be like a breadth example. A depth example, or I guess like again height example would be maybe finding someone who has more skill than I do in sales or more skill than I do in marketing. So like I'm great at marketing, but like I'm probably not a real marketing strategist. Like I can boots on the ground, like do the work, try a bunch of things, get the data, see what worked, double down on that. But like from a big picture, like I'm not a CMO, like that's never going to be me. So it might be that we get to the point where I'm like, oh, I need to hire that strategist level marketing person rather than like some other people who I can say like, yeah, I've done that job and I can hire you to just replace my hours in it. So those are the two scenarios.
Yeah, it's tricky too. And then, always wanting to evaluate the ROI of something that you're not doing today, right? Like, because one of the reasons I've been resistant to that is I think, listen, if it were really that important, then I would be doing that today. But that's also a way to limit the business's capabilities from, like you said, from like breadth versus depth.
Yeah.
My last question, and I'll see what the group has as far as questions. The second half of the previous question on, okay, so either whether you're hiring for breadth or depth, buying back your time or not, what would you recommend, at least as a high level framework, to make sure to at least improve the odds that who you're going to hire is going to work? And my context was always like in sales, and I had a mentor early in sales that said, listen, dude, like you bat 350, you're going to the Hall of Fame. Like when it comes to sales, there's just certain things that you can look for, but there's an element of you're not going to bat 1,000. There's just no way. But you can't play that same game with CMOs. You can't play that same game with ops. You can't, like, that's just not, I don't think you want to necessarily build attrition into your model. So hiring for these other roles, especially if it's your first time hiring for real, what would you recommend as far as a process to increase the chance that it works?
Such a good question. Obviously, I think there are a lot of different pieces to this. My number one is spend at least twice as much time researching the position and putting together a position profile as you think you need. Most people will Google something, they'll find a similar job on Indeed, they'll make their own little tweaks to it, and like that's it, good to go. They post it. By the way, there's a difference between a position profile and a job posting. And so like that's kind of all the thought that most people will put into it. So if you could commit to spending maybe 10 hours researching what a CMO, using the CMO example, like what a CMO actually is supposed to be doing. What's the difference between a CMO and maybe a director of marketing? Aside from pay, what are the expectations that I should have? Assuming that I can afford both, why would I hire a director of marketing over a CMO? That kind of thing. So really just looking at like doing that research piece first. The next thing is, and this is, I would say the most common mistake that I have seen people make, and I have worked with so many people, almost across the board, this is what like I think of them as newbie hirers do, is they compare candidate to candidate. So this would be like going on a date with like 5 women and being like, well, they're all blonde and they all have blue eyes and they're all pretty. So like, how do I pick? Well, like she can cook and like she wants to be a mom, and you're like looking at all these things and it's just like, that doesn't make sense. You have to look at like, what is the spec? What do you want? What is like the actual need that you have? So in hiring, we're going to look at, again, we'll say CMO. Like I'm never going to compare two CMO candidates. I'm going to look at this CMO that I interviewed and compare them against that position profile that I spent 10 hours researching and putting together. And I'm going to make sure that I'm getting what I need in every category. I'm clear on what is nice to have versus what's an actual need. But we'll definitely look at that comparison rather than, well, Fred has this experience, but George has this experience. So that's, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that people make. On top of that, asking behavioral-based interview questions. If you guys don't know how to do that, good news, ChatGPT can literally write them for you. But making sure that you're asking the same questions of every candidate, at least the same like kind of top level questions, and you can like dig down a little bit more. Expect yourself to be biased, and so keep some kind of scorecard, again, against the profile, not against each other. Because you're going to see something in somebody and be like, I either dislike that or I absolutely love that. One of my best friends is a CFO. She's like got a CFO consultancy, like whatever, fractional business. And she made like 12 bad hires in a row. I said, like, that's great if you are hiring for a best friend, but not great if you're hiring for someone who's going to make sure that your clients are taken care of. And so what we want to do is, hire for people who are meeting the criteria that we're looking for, not who feel good to us. I've definitely hired people before who I didn't personally love. Like I wouldn't be like, hey, let's grab a beer. I'm not saying you should hate them, but like, I just like, I want to get along with them. And like, I don't need to be like, oh man, like we should do yoga on the weekends together. Like what I want is to know that they're going to take care of the client better than I can take care of the client. That's what I'm hiring for, is like, are they going to do that? And so that would be another thing that I would say. There's so many things, but those are some good ones.
That's awesome. That's very helpful. It's a lot of hires in a row, but you learn the lesson eventually. And I was actually just talking to my wife this weekend, and we were talking about different roles and where we're headed with things. And she said, well, just keep something in mind. Every great COO that you've had, you butted heads with a lot. Like, yeah. And like because I've run a couple of turnarounds I've had, and now I now have two people that I would go to for these types of things, because we've learned how to fight with each other. But the thing, like if I just hired another me, we'd break the damn place. Like you need one to do one type of thinking, one to do another type of thinking and execution. And together you get like this symbiosis or this like connection. You're like, oh, that works. But you have to be willing to tolerate that level of friction, at least from my experience, to make that happen. Okay. So this has been super helpful. What I'd like to do is just see from the audience, like from the group, what questions do you have? And I would say, I can see, just looking at who's here, like we have a few different stages. So really interested in, Jamie, I don't know if you have if anybody's like dropped anything in chat, or but if not, then let's, by show of hands, like who has a question? Let's fire this up and see what else Megan can educate us on.
Yeah, nothing in the chat, but I'm interested to see if any hands go, because if not, I've got a couple.
Well, then break the seal, bro. Do it.
Yeah. Megan, you spoke about not wanting to have too much SOP detail, and you still need SOPs and you need something that's repeatable. What's your criteria for knowing what counts as a 4 out of 10? Because I suspect that I might go, listen, this is light touch, but it's actually 8.5 and impossible to use as a disaster.
That's a good question. I'm not going to put that much thought into it, honestly. If I'm putting too much thought into it, like it is an 8. And if I create something that's an 8 one time, because maybe that's an area where I can go more in depth really easily, then great. Like I love that for me and my team. But I'm not going to map it out much in advance. I will probably, by the way, one of my very favorite things, I wrote something called the Expert Hiring Playbook last summer, kind of for funsies, where I mapped out all the SOPs that I have around hiring. It was like over 100 SOPs. And the goal was, I don't want to create a course on hiring. I want people to have a tool that they can just like literally go through and be like, like I'm at the interview stage. Let's look at interviewing. Here are the different types of interviews. Okay, I want to do this one. How do I do that? And the way that I created this is the way that I create like all of my SOPs internally is I do either a Loom video of myself doing it, if it's like a do kind of thing, or if it's a talk through kind of thing. And then I'll take the transcript from that and I will paste it into ChatGPT and be like, turn this into a written process for me. And so like that's my $1 million hack for creating the best freaking SOPs, is just talking through it like I'm sharing it with somebody. It will take you maybe 10 minutes per SOP to do. And if it takes a lot longer than that, if it takes more than 10 minutes beyond what the task itself takes, you are putting too much into it.
This was great, by the way, Megan. Thank you so much for doing this. My question right now with one of the companies I'm running, we're right into kind of an early funding stage, and I'm looking into tech stacks. So how often do you review the tech stack that you have with your group? And also when you change over to something, how do you make sure those processes aren't lost?
So I think of it as a light review. That's a solo review monthly, where I look at every charge that comes out kind of on a recurring basis and just go, are we using it? Are we using it? Are we using it? Like, that's it. Like, are we using it? Then I will quarterly work with my leadership team to look at things and go, okay, like I know we're using these things. Are we using them to their full potential? Are they, I think Brian and I have actually talked about this a little bit. Is this, so we put everything into one of 4 buckets. Does this save me money, make me money, or save me time? If it does none of those, it goes into the 4th bucket, which is cancel immediately. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Obviously, there are times where we're not using something right now and we decide for whatever reason that we're going to keep it. And that is it, like you always got to put a timeline, or a deadline rather on that. As far as like making sure that the processes aren't lost in the switch over, this is really hard. So by the way, I'm very, very cautious about switching software. A software change loses you at best 1 month of productivity per team member using it. So like, just, yeah, don't do it if you don't have to. If you have to, it's because you are reaching scale issues with it. One way or the other. Sometimes people are like scaling down and it's like, oh, we just don't use HubSpot enough to justify this massive bill. We could move to high level. So what I'm going to do then is go through with every person on my team and ask them, not like give me the SOP, but tell me what are all the things that you do. And we're going to compile a full like master checklist of everything that we need to make sure we have done or we have documented in the new program before we fully cancel this. So, and not just documented. So SOP, by the way, is we tend to think of those as like written or nowadays Loom. But there's actually, let me see if I have the keyboard shortcut for this. Process list. Great. that is a list of all of the SOP formats that I just put in the chat. All the SOP formats that when I'm working with my clients to create all of their SOPs, those are the things that we're building out. So it does include templates. It includes like vendor lists. It includes like just an unbelievable amount of stuff that you would be like, oh, like that's an SOP. Basically, it's a shortcut of any kind. Matrices, which I think the plural is actually matrices, and that's weird. So like, I'm going to look at like what of these exist in our existing tech stack that we need to make sure we have every single thing replaced. And it could be an automation. Again, like it might be like, oh, we moved all the emails over for our like sequence from high level into HubSpot, or, you know, like if we're upgrading. But like we didn't actually create the flow, so they're not going to go out automatically. So I need to make sure that like that's on my checklist. So like I just have like a master checklist before we can cancel anything. We've gone through and made sure that like everything meticulously is there and documented if documentation is required.
If I could just reinforce something that comes accompanied with my own strong biases and a ton of probably entrepreneurial version of PTSD, and it's just tech migrations are always more expensive, more difficult, take longer, overpromised. I mean, it's just like, and I think a lot of us, I think by nature, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be an optimist. Like otherwise, nobody would put yourself through all of this shit if there wasn't like something else on the other side. Like, so by nature, we have to be optimistic. And I believe that same mindset often costs us in not doing due diligence or not being pessimistic enough about the potential outcome of something. And I've done it several times, and it's just, you know what, if we make this migration, everything will be together. I cannot tell you how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars I've spent throughout corporate, like through agencies, on things that were supposed to end with this like unicorn level of insight into the entire customer journey. And you get there and months and months go by of lost productivity. And that is, as a solopreneur or as a micro business, that is absolutely a death knell, right? Like losing that degree of productivity and focus and efficiency and momentum. I mean, the costs aside, but the distraction. And I've been guilty of it. Like because I'm optimistic. I'm like, all right, this is going to be it. Let's do it. And you go, oh fuck, I did it again. You know, so. I'm reminding myself as we speak.
Thank you so much, Megan. This has been really insightful. I know sometimes I push this off, right? Ops, and it's integrated. It's spaghetti, right? It's integrated in every facet of the business. My question is, how do you hire a smart person? Because you can get the SOP down and everything else, but to me, it's the smart person. I love how you say 4 to 5. That's kind of how I hire. I want a smart person, and I'm not going to make them a robot. So you train them. I do pretty active training. I'm big into player development. But ultimately, I just want a smart person that can run with.
I'm going to do my best to answer the question. Correct me as I'm going if this is not like the direction that is helpful for you. The biggest thing here is in your interview process, you need to make sure that you are interviewing for thinking. It's about understanding like how they think and how they're going to problem solve. So I do just a ton of questions on thinking. My whole process is geared toward them becoming or them showing me that they are a problem solver, showing me the way that they think. And like, I don't actually care about intelligence that much. I care about proactivity and like problem solving ability. I've had people who are like not the brightest, but they're not stupid, who are just like world class. Like that is my A player because they can follow directions and then they can like ask questions. So this also goes back to asking behavioral interview questions. Usually what will precede, we should put a pin in this, remind me, Ray. Several people talked about like hiring process at the beginning, like wanting to know hiring process. So let's come back to that. But my hiring process is I define a set of core competencies that each position needs or that like my culture requires. And one of the ones that my culture requires is curiosity and problem solving. Because if you're not curious, you will not question anything and you'll never innovate anything. And you're going to be completely reliant on me. That is a recipe for absolute disaster. 100% of the time, if you are not curious and you are not a problem solver. So those are not like position competencies. Those are like cultural competencies that we interview every single person for organization wide. So and when I say organization wide, I mean like every company that I'm in, any position that could possibly work with me, you have to go through that because I can't do that. I can't be curious for you. I'm curious enough for me in that completely opposite direction. So
yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Sometimes I'll ask the question, depending on the position, how many, because I'm hiring in the Philippines.
Yeah,
that's my focus, and there's been iterations, but it's been outstanding. When you get a smart person there, it's just like, wow, this is terrific. But
and so,
one of the questions, go ahead.
Sorry, just since I know you're hiring in the Philippines, so they're very well educated, they're very intelligent, but they have something to research would be this thing called the Power Distance Index. And this is about how each of us respond to power or authority. And as we all have probably experienced to some extent or another, in the Philippines, they are very respectful of authority. So I actually go out of my way when I'm hiring in the Philippines to hire people who are a little bit like counterculture on the Power Distance Index compared to like the Philippines as a whole. So I look for people who maybe are a little bit disrespectful, outspoken, like they're sort of like the outcasts culturally there. When you're hiring in the Philippines, it's legal for you to do any kind of personality assessment that you like. So I look for the people who might be like INTJ, ENTJ. You won't find a lot of extroverts in the Philippines. INFJ. If you can find INTJ, INFJ, like those are really, really great people to hire in the Philippines. And they're innately curious. They don't have the same understanding of like of power or authority that is like cultural. But really like any N type would be a good hire for what you're looking for versus an S type, which is a whole other discussion. So sorry, you had another question though.
No, I mean this is really helpful. This is the tricky part for me because they're too obedient of a society, right? Yes. Everything is the authority. And I'm like, okay, how do we get them to think? And I have someone running one of my businesses and he's curious. He has the problem solving, but ultimately he's like, I don't care he's outside of the norms of the Philippines. He's like, you can question anything. And he questions me. And I'm like, yes, this is what I want. Mm-hmm. But the other question I try to ask people for problem solving is how many, in the Philippines, how many gas stations are in the Philippines? Please think out loud. I want to hear that process. Any guessing, you're done. But if you can systemically come up with something, that's a problem solver. That's kind of that's what intrigues me more. People that can do that.
So just do a little bit of research or maybe just have ChatGPT explain Power Distance Index to you. There's a list, I think it might be in Wikipedia, of like where all the countries like generally fall. And then just basically you want to hire for like the counterculture in the Philippines, if you can. So
okay.
It's not intelligence. It's like it is completely about authority and willingness to challenge authority, which, by the way, you can ask a behavioral interview question for like willingness to challenge authority.
That's so important, too, especially when you're hiring for something that, you don't want to have to know every single thing about. Right. Like there are just a lot of roles where I don't want to have to know everything in this role and document everything in this role and like SOP everything in this role, and then you just do exactly what I say. That's like that never works with me. First of all, like I joke sometimes like I'm the world's worst manager per se, like in terms of like day to day looking over your back. Like I'm much better in terms of hire people that can tell me what to do, or hire entrepreneurial thinking, like people that want to just go, solve problems. And like you said, Megan, like be curious. And if somebody on my team requires me to tell them what to do exactly, an SOP and system, like manage that to a T, it's probably not going to be a good fit. So I just dropped the link, and I'm going to do some research on that power distance index, because I've hired a lot in the Philippines, and that's been like it's been one of the challenges is finding the best team member that can just go execute and not respect my authority. Like, fuck it, I don't respect authority. Like, I don't need you to respect my authority. I need you to get the job done. Like, and so, good questions, John. Thank you.
There's a good question that I ask. I have this thing called the pre-interview questionnaire that's basically a written interview. And the power distance index question that I ask on there is like, delete the two sentences that least apply to you, basically leave the sentence that most applies to you. And the statement is something like, I do my best, or the three statements are like, I do my best to complete the work with the information that I have. That's what you would want to hire for in an entrepreneurial organization. The middle kind of option is, if I have questions, I will ask my coworkers like for help or something like that. And then the like highest power distance index question is, I will ask my supervisor for clarification. And so I pretty much always hire the people who are like, no, I'm going to do it and hope that it works out.
Well, nothing's worse than like you say, you've been doing something for a while, and then you come across a new piece of information and you're like, hey, if we do this on a LinkedIn post, we'll get twice the reach. And somebody says, oh, I know. You go, why in the hell have we been doing it the other way? Well, because that's what you said. Well, no, okay, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
All right. What's any other
I saw Jamie raise his hand though.
Jamie?
Yeah, Megan, I've got a question. So let's say you hire someone, and now they've gone through the process, you've worked their answer to that question amongst others. Do you say this to them up front? Listen, I want you to take the initiative. I want you to not be overwhelmingly respectful of power dynamics. Is there any disadvantage to just sort of stating that up front?
Yeah.
So
I try to do it in a more subtle way. I'm like never really known for subtlety, so I'd have to actually ask my team members, like, did it feel subtle or not? But the way that I will do it, so especially like when we hire new people from the Philippines, I think we've probably all experienced this in some form or fashion, is like they'll call you like Miss or Mr. And like I just say like, oh, hey, like it's Megan. I'll correct them every time until they stop and just call me Megan. And then like when they come to me and ask me questions, I'll say, that's a really good question. What do you think? I have not answered a question, like a team member question, in years. I pretty much flat out refuse to answer questions. Well, what do you think? It sounds like that would be worth trying. Let me know how it goes. So this is, I think my, by the way, when I started Queen of Ops, I built it $0 to $1 million in year one. I actually did it in 11 and a half months, but who's counting? And the way that I did it, was that I was completely willing to let my people make mistakes. So, when I look at other organizations that are growing, by the way, there's nothing wrong with like growing slow at all. It's just that like this was the right business for me at the right time, like it just did everything right. The way that it worked so well was I was willing to let people make mistakes. And when I look at other organizations, they're in there like, oh no, like, let me do that for you. oh my gosh, like you're messing this up. And so they'll like give it to you and then like take it back. Like, no. I will post it on Instagram. And so like I was just like really willing to let people make mistakes and give them chances to fix it over and over and over again, and train and correct. And eventually you have to fire people, but yeah, like I'm not out there saying like I'm the authority or sorry, like I don't want authority in anything. I'm out there showing them that they're actually going to be the authority, and making sure that like the way that I treat them and that we treat each other culturally is to empower each individual person in their position. And Zach had a question, I think, about this.
It wasn't actually about this, Megan. So if you want to keep on this train, we can. I was actually going to switch to a systems question. Can you tell us maybe one of your top 3 systems that you've automated in the last year or two that's made the biggest impact in your company?
So my very favorite thing is that I built, do y'all know what ClickUp is? It's a project management tool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like Asana.
Yeah. So I built what is known as an applicant tracking system, which is basically like a CRM, but for hiring in ClickUp. And it functioned better than an applicant tracking system. Just the way that it like ended up, like that it all worked out was like literally better. My company moved over to a fancy applicant tracking system. Spent, as I discussed, we spent a lot of time and money and manpower to move that over and make that happen. And after 3 months on it, my team came to me crying, why did we do this? We don't want to do this anymore. So we moved back over to ClickUp, and like now that's like the template that I install in my clients' businesses. Obviously, we like customize it for them. But hilariously enough, my brother owns a software company, and he's building now what I made in ClickUp, like just little old ClickUp. He's building that out as like their applicant tracking system in their business. So that's like my win. That's like my prideful moment. Because what it did was it created like a very clear flow. So it really was truly like a combination of system and process. It made our meetings go smoother. Like everything in the company became easier as a result of it. But like truthfully, most of the ones that like, it's all like the small little things where you're just like, I'm going to take 10 minutes to automate this. And then I never have to touch it again. Those kinds of things are those are my favorites. And they're like, I can't even think it, like, it's like, if people respond to an email with this word or this is in the subject line, those kinds of things that just, make everything go like real easy. Yeah.
In the interest of your time, Megan, I want to be respectful of that. And like you've done, this has been super helpful. Like the more questions we ask, the more questions I think of to ask. And that means probably pretty bad time for your calendar because that means we can do this all day long. But like I said, in the interest of your time, why don't we wrap? Can you pitch me? Like, what do you sell? Like who for the interest of the audience? And when we reshare this, like what is your offer? What are you doing? How are you helping people today?
Yeah. Well, right now, the thing that I like just love as a great way to actually help companies. I have this thing called the Great Start Tool. What I didn't tell you guys at the beginning is my dad actually owned a recruiting firm. And so I got to steal all of his stuff and make it better. Legally. And so this is a tool that he and I built together. Well, he built it and then I made it better. And I especially made it better for people that have remote teams. And the Great Start Tool is basically a whole process for onboarding team members. So I don't know if you guys know this, but like most team members, when they fail, it's because of us. And it's usually because of uncommunicated expectations, miscommunicated expectations, misaligned expectations, or the kicker, unreasonable expectations. And so this tool is meant to just completely eliminate that. But it also reviews your onboarding and training process. And so I basically do a customized install of this, of the Great Start tool, where like we get on a call, we talk for 90 minutes. I build this out, make sure it looks good. And then I like will put it into either your project management tool, make it a Google Doc for you if that's what's easiest. But it's like a great way to get a formalized process in place to make your new hires more successul.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more about that or just follow you more on social or around the Digi Universe place that we're in, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are like probably the two like professional-ish places that I am. But if you type in my name, which I'll spell out for you guys here, if you type my name in, I'm basically on every platform. I'm pretty sure I'm like DMable on every platform. And then I also, of course, check emails. So I'll put that in the chat as well, mk@megankuethen.com. So yeah, reach out to me anywhere and would love to hear from you guys. Love to answer any more questions y'all have, whatever I can do to help.
Well, this has been super kick-ass. And I think the underlying theme is, we focus so much on systems that drive growth, like revenue, leads, marketing, sales. Like how do we grow this thing? And this is oftentimes this part of ops, the organization, the people, the systems, the product, those more broadly speaking in the business in general are oftentimes ignored at the expense of just focusing on growth. And surely there's a time for that. Like obviously, like cash is king, but there is a point at which if you ever want your thing to go from income to business, you have to drive the right ops. Appreciate your time a ton. And making yourself accessible and dropping in your contact information. And thanks for everybody that hopped on and had some questions. I hope you got everything that you were looking for. If not, post things up in the community and or reach out to Megan directly, or if you're interested in what was it again, Megan? The new
Great Start tool. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. I'll cut you loose and we will all regroup. Thanks again, Megan.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, Megan.